Police used pepper spray during anti-parallel trading protests in Yuen Long. Man infected with H7N9 bird flu after visiting Guangdong dies in Hong Kong. And thousands to rally in Moscow following the killing of an opposition leader.
Good evening. Chaotic scenes in Yuen Long today as clashes broke out during yet another anti-parallel trading protest there. Police again used pepper spray to try and bring the crowds under control. Joel De Silva reports.
Tense from the very first minute. As hundreds of protesters answered the call from so-called localist groups such as Hong Kong Indigenous and Civic Passion, another group opposing the rally awaited them outside Long Ping Station on the West Rail Line. Police formed a cordon between them as they exchanged insults, the latest in a series of anti-parallel trading protests. This one is taking place after recent signals from the local government that it may be ready to discuss with mainland authorities potential changes to the multiple entry permit scheme. Those taking part think that's not enough.
If we consider the so-called cost and benefit considerations, then you can see right now, along with the Eastern Railway line, then different communities, they are suffering from the social cost because of the implementation of multi-entry system. So multi-entry permit system. So that I think the ultimate solution is to forbidden the policy, the permit system.
He also accused local leaders of prioritizing personal interests over their own communities, as many of them own land and property that benefit from the shopping boom. These protesters want nothing short of an outright abolition of the multiple entry permit scheme and say visitors from across the border are ruining Hong Kong communities. But judging from the reception they got here in Yuen Long, their views are far from consensual. People who were unhappy with the rally lined up along the streets as protesters started marching. Some businesses, fearing a repeat of the chaos in recent anti-parallel trading protests, had their shutters lowered. As protesters marched through the streets around the Yuen Long government offices, an area popular with mainland tourists, tensions escalated and clashes broke out. Police used pepper spray and forced several protesters to the ground to bring the situation under control. At least one protester saw blood. Some were taken away by officers. The police urged the public to express their views in a peaceful and rational manner. The authorities said officers will take resolute enforcement actions to maintain order and protect public safety. Legislator Stephen Ho says the protest has affected the economy in Yuen Long.
We are welcome to the Hong Kong people to raise their voice and to protest and tell the public that what they want in Yuen Long. But somehow we are not welcome on any violence or any violence in the Hong Kong's in the Yuen Long area, in Yuen Long district.
But he agreed there are problems with the multiple entry permit scheme which need to be resolved. Joel De Silva, TVB News.
Now we take a look at the live scene over in Yuen Long. The protesters gathered in different areas within Yuen Long, but over here on Sao Fu Street, there are still many who are staying on. The situation is a lot calmer now, but earlier there were several arrests made as people reportedly attacked police officers, including throwing things at police, kicking police vehicles, and just generally shouting abuse and being violent to them. Now, there are other reports that others were injured as well in the protests. Lots of shops had to close their shutters early on in the day, and no doubt there will be fallout from this tomorrow.
On to some other local news now, and the 61-year-old man who was diagnosed with H7N9 bird flu following a visit to a wet market in Guangdong province died at Queen Mary Hospital this morning. Secretary for Food and Health Ko Wing-man urged the public to report their travel history accurately to medical workers when they seek medical attention. Owen Fung reports.
The 61-year-old man paid 2 visits to Dongguan in Guangdong province last month. He bought 2 chickens from a wet market in Jiangmutou just before the Lunar New Year. The man started coughing and had trouble breathing after he returned to Hong Kong. He was admitted to Queen Mary Hospital on 20th of February and was diagnosed with H7N9 bird flu 3 days later. The deceased had underlying medical conditions and was taking various medications. He died at 6 this morning after experiencing multiple organ failure. The man initially denied he'd visited the live poultry market when he was admitted to hospital. As a result, the 5 medical workers who treated him didn't wear the appropriate protective gear and had to be quarantined.
There are still places, especially in mainland China, which is affected by H7N9. And if our citizens are traveling to these places, I would like to appeal to them again to please avoid coming into contact with wild birds, live poultry, or visiting places or markets where live poultry are on sale.
Ko also urged the public to give complete details of their travel history to healthcare workers when they seek medical attention. It would ensure proper treatment is given while reducing the risk for medical practitioners, Ko explained. President of the Center of Infection Ho Pak Leung says avian influenza H7N9 has a mortality rate of 30%, and for patients with underlying illnesses, it can be as high as 50%. Ho also warns that the bird flu virus could mix with seasonal influenza H3N2 virus, resulting in a potentially more contagious and deadly variant. Owen Fung, TVB News.
A survey commissioned by the Democratic Alliance for the Betterment and Progress of Hong Kong shows 61% of respondents are in favour of passing a political reform package under a framework set by Beijing. The pro-establishment camp says a pan-Democrat should heed the will of the majority of Hong Kong people. But as Liz Yun reports, some pan-Democratic legislators say the opponents, who account for some 30% of the respondents, should not be ignored.
The Democratic Alliance for the Betterment and Progress of Hong Kong commissioned a survey to collect views on the way forward for Hong Kong's constitutional reform. A total of 811 people were interviewed last month. Around 60% of them said the Legislative Council should pass a reform package to be put forward by the government that complies with the framework set by the National People's Congress Standing Committee. But 30% of those surveyed, or 241 interviewees, said legislators should veto the government's reform package. Among these 241 people, 81% of them rejected the idea of pocketing it first, even if they promised that the electoral system will be improved gradually after the 2017 chief executive election. And a staggering 83% of the respondents think lawmakers should make their decisions based on the preference of the majority of Hong Kong people. Holden Chow, chairman of Young DAB, welcomes any future meetings between Beijing officials and the pan-Democrats.
What I mean, the dialogue is essential or necessary to sort of maybe convince them on how we're going to modify our universal suffrage after 2017. That may be discussed, right? So if you do not have a dialogue, they don't even have a chance to talk about this.
But Emily Lau, chairwoman of the Democratic Party, hit back.
We will not talk to them if they would not allow us to express our views and concerns on the 2017 election. If there are preconditions, then we will not take part in the discussion.
And Civic Party leader Alan Leong repeated his stance.
But even taking DAB's figures, 30% of Hong Kong people do not want to pocket a faked democracy, false democracy. Perhaps the Central People's Government and the SAR government should think about how to give Hong Kong people a real choice.
Despite calls from the pro-Beijing camp not to vote against the will of the majority, the Pan-Democrats recalled recent polls with opposing results and insisted they would vote down the reform package when the government submits it to LegCo later this year. Liz Yun, TVB News.
Turning overseas now, thousands of people will rally in Moscow later today in remembrance of Boris Nemtsov, who was shot dead on Friday. He was due to lead an opposition march today, but instead his supporters will mourn a man who was possibly killed for his opposition to authority. A sea of flowers marked the spot on a bridge where Russian opposition figure Boris Nemtsov was gunned down in Moscow close to the Kremlin. It's been less than 48 hours after the former deputy prime minister was killed, and already the conspiracy theories are in overdrive. Some believe it was a foreign plot to frame Russia's government and destabilize the country, while others say it was a plan hatched to falsely implicate the West. Russia's investigative committee says it's looking into several causes, including Nemtsov's opposition to the Ukraine conflict, his political and personal life, Islamic extremism, or an attempt to undermine the state. Bill Broder, who's led an international campaign to punish officials he blames for the death of Sergei Magnitsky, a Russian lawyer, thinks finding the true reason will be hard.
I'm 100% confident that there won't be a fair investigation into his murder because Putin is organizing it.
One analyst thinks Nemtsov made some powerful enemies for his outspoken political views.
Being a critic of the authorities is nearly equal to being a criminal, in which violence is the best way to solve any problems, in which the society thinks of itself as a besieged fortress.
Von Eggert also thinks Nemtsov's reported work on a dossier outlining alleged Russian military involvement in Ukraine only made things more dangerous for him.
Although we don't know who committed the murder, but if you're talking about the atmosphere, the context in which it happened, I could say that Ukraine came to Moscow. The violence that we witness daily on our TV screens, the violence that's very frequently glorified by state propaganda, this violence could not but finally take root in Russia.
Other observers believe the Ukraine conflict, claims of foreign meddling in Russia, and a society polarized between those who support the government and those who are against it, have created a worrying atmosphere of political hysteria.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro said his government has arrested U.S. citizens, including a pilot, on suspicion of espionage. The socialist leader made the announcement as government supporters and opponents protested outside the presidential palace in Caracas. Maduro claims the captured U.S. pilot was carrying all kinds of documentation, but he wouldn't elaborate. He also ordered the reduction of U.S. embassy staff in Caracas in retaliation for the U.S. pulling the same stunt last year. He said from now on, Venezuela will require U.S. citizens to get visas before visiting, and he banned former President George W. Bush and former Vice President Dick Cheney from visiting. Maduro has long accused the U.S. of trying to topple him, but the Obama administration denies it. Political opponents of Maduro say it's a smokescreen. They say he's just distracting attention from his failures, consumer goods shortages, soaring prices, and an economic crisis. And still to come in our news tonight. A call for a change in policies to protect foreign domestic helpers from abuse and exploitation. South Korea urges Japan to acknowledge historical truth. And Prince Charles visits tsunami-stricken regions in Japan.
From flamenco dancers and dancing horses in southern Spain to model making and beer brewing in eastern Germany, see Europe by train, according to a 1913 guidebook. Friday, Great Continental Railway Journeys, Season 2 at 8 on Pearl.
A walking tour to Macau will never be the same. You can look further, watch closer, capture more, discover extras. The Step Out Experience